it's Scott, the piano guy. You know, you got to be really careful what you start calling yourself when you first start out doing this because it sticks like mud, particularly if you've ever had a TV show. So, anyway, it's nice to see you all. We're going to probably spend, it's going to be about 20, 25 minutes today. Good news is, just because it is Friday, it's kind of a woohoo, we're all going to be done in a little bit. If you've got any questions or anything that I can possibly answer about anything but politics or religion, actually, anything other than politics and religion, I'd be happy to answer them, especially if they have something to do with piano, and I'll try my best. But besides that, I've got one little thing I do want to talk about for about 4 or 5 minutes, just my little proselytizing for the day about piano stuff. It's actually in response to a comment we got, and kind of I think it was a little kind of a snide response to some Facebook post we had. And I wanted to get into it a little deeper because actually it's something we hear a lot. But before I get right into that, I do want to remind everybody, as always, kind of the housekeeping stuff. If you're new here and you have not subscribed to this YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do so. You can do it very simply by, see if I do this right off camera right. I think would be that. Yes, I think it's right there. There ought to be by now, if we've been up for 30 seconds, a little logo, a little piano logo. Click on that and it'll allow you to subscribe. And then the one step after that, if you have subscribed, usually somewhere on the page there you'll see a little tiny bell-shaped thing. And what you need to do is click on that so it looks like it's ringing or something. And all that does, that will then alert you when we come on to do live things like this or whenever I post new videos, because we're really going to be a lot more active here in 2018 than I was in 2017. So that's that. And also I would like to encourage you, if as always, if this sounds like it's something that might be in concert with the way you're wanting to play some piano, pardon the pun, and you are not already a student, I would encourage you to go check out our online courses at pianoinaflash.com. That is the deep dive into everything that I've ever done and that I do like this. And so we have a free introductory course there. So if you are interested, you can hop over there and kind of dip your toes in the water and see if maybe we'd be a good fit, or I would be a good fit for your teacher one way or the other. So let's get into this. What this was a comment coming back. Somebody had said something about using lead sheets, which is the style of notation that I use when we play piano, right? And the response said something, like, "Oh, so you only use lead sheets? You never use the grand staff?" Question mark. Then it said, dot, 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 dot after it, like, well, this can't be very, this can't be very serious stuff, right? Well, I do want to get into that because that is absolutely correct. We focus exclusively on non-classical genres, right? And because of that, the style of notation that we work exclusively from is lead sheets, which is the way pros play, right? Now, for those of you that have never heard any of this, and I'm sure most of you watching this probably have, a lead sheet is just a single note melody line with chord changes up above them. Like it'll say C7, F7, whatever it is, B flat minor. It's the kind of chord changes that guitar players play, right? And very intentionally, I just want to say this, sometimes I think people think it's a shortcut or it's a backdoor thing, right? But very intentionally, in the styles that I teach, you do not want to have a fully notated arrangement of music, right? You don't want to learn something verbatim. I guess that's the point, right? Instead, the goal is to just learn the melody line and the chord symbol so that every time you play it, you're kind of free to interpret the tune, hopefully a little bit different every time you do it, but it's your job to interpret it as you see fit. And that just probably totally blows up the brain of any of you that may be watching, or those that have taken a lot of classical lessons or spent most of their piano playing life trying to recreate something that has already been written, right? And again, neither one of them are better or worse. They're just these very different exercises, right? So kind of the exercise in classical music, until you really get to an advanced stage, is to learn something perfectly, right? You've got to learn it exactly the way it was written, i.e., you're not at liberty to noodle around with a Bach two-part invention, or if you're starting to do the I don't even know, something, you're going down that path. When something like that happens, you're not really changing it every time. The goal there is to recreate something that has already been written, or in the case of an arrangement, to play exactly what someone else has kind of already done that I want you to do from the start, right? So that's the exact opposite of the goal that we have with non-classical music, where you never want to play the same thing twice. And it's kind of the difference again between recreating what someone has written versus creating for the first time something new every time you do it. This is kind of an old analogy I used to use in workshops all the time, but I think it's a pretty good one. You know, if I gave you a, you know, we're taking a painting class, right? And, you know, I set up a vase with some fruit around it and said, all right, now I'd like you all to paint this 4 times. Well, each time you painted it, it would be the same subject, right? And the equivalent for us would be the same tune, but every one of those 4 paintings would be a little bit different, right? It'd be like your own little twist on it that time. Same time, same way every time. You wouldn't paint it 4 times. You just paint it once and then take a Xerox of it, right? Similarly in music, it's like if I want to hear myself play something exactly the same way twice, I'll record it. But I certainly don't want to just keep turning into this non-creative kind of note regurgitator. I want to be creating something every single time I play. So there you have it. So that is really the difference between learning tunes from lead sheets, which by definition don't have an arrangement of the tune and don't tell you every note to play, because we want you to do that, as opposed to playing a traditionally notated grand staff piece of music. So hopefully that clears that up. And again, neither is better or worse. Neither is more right or more wrong. They just are kind of the appropriate styles for playing the different routes, you know, whether you're going down the classical path or kind of the non-classical path. And you know, where that kind of muddies up is and a lot of people aren't aware of this, is that, boy, you know, a lot of the great masters, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, they were great improvisers, and when they were playing their own music, you know, they were improvising on that quite a bit. But somewhere down, you know, the 300 years of 350, I don't know if I'm doing the right math on the years, you know, since then, everything has gotten kind of codified and very official, and this is exactly what was written, and this is exactly where you're supposed to play it. So that's kind of the exercise that you can do everywhere else. If you're wanting to play the styles that we teach, we don't do that. So there, hopefully that cleared that up a little bit. So having said that, if anybody has any questions, if anybody's on, how many, do we have any, yeah, we're looking some, yeah, some. What I was going to say, if anybody's got any questions, please post them in the chat or in the comments. I can't remember exactly where that happens on YouTube for the YouTube live stuff, and let me know, and I'll try to answer something. If not, maybe I'll just give something away. Anything? Here we go. Something's coming. Sorry, I'm sitting here having to look at another screen where my little elves, my helpers out there, are doing it. All right, I like Sunny Side of the Street. I've been playing bland. Could you help me jazz it up? Sunny, put a sunny side of the street. You could, yeah, probably the best way to do, and I don't want to do it directly to that tune. I'm going to do it to this is going to be a more generic version. This is just kind of to help me jazz it up. I've been playing a bland version of it, right? Probably the best way to very simply, I mean super simply, start to mix it up with a melody line. Let me switch to my can shot here. Is to instead of playing a tune exactly as the melody is written, right? Run up and down, you know, maybe up to the sunny side of the street. I'll just use that little blip just to do it. If it's written like this, or you know, that's probably the way it would be notated if you were pulling out your metronome and you were playing it exactly as written. But you know, the quicker way to, or the quickest way to start noodling around or to make something interesting is get to whatever the note is you're trying to play from 1 or 2 notes below it. Like slide into it. It's called a grace note or a slide or a jazz slide. But instead of playing, you know, I'd probably play just that little bit really changes it. Or you could run up a couple notes. And and then start playing it not rhythmically the way it's written exactly, but the way you'd play it. So, on the sunny side the street, boo, doo, doo, da, da, doo, doo, right? Do, da. Instead of, you'd probably play, doo, 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 right? Just try to sing along with it or sing something and then imitate what you're singing. I think that's a great way to go about doing it. Another thing, if you're playing slower tunes, I give this one away all the time, but it's just a good one because it's so easy to do and something in a quick little format like these live things we're doing. You can also always play a melody line in octaves, right? Something like that. That's simple enough. Sorry, I was trying to get my fingers out of the way. You know, something like that. Yeah, maybe something. Well, I think I'm just going to leave it there. We've got some more questions coming in. We'll do it. But basically, I think the easiest thing to do is to, number one, try to get away from, and you could go down this other path and start doing chord substitutions, but that's way beyond what I want to get into in this short amount of time. But I think the fastest, quickest way for most people that are kind of getting rolling is to do your best to not read the melody line exactly as written. Try to get the gist of it and then close, right? Close the lead sheet. There's a funny thing having to do with my earlier comment. The only reason that a lead sheet exists is for you to need it as little as possible. Ah! Right? Brain explosion. I mean that. Again, the idea is that you just want to get the melody line and the chord changes and then put it away and just memorize that so that then you're free to do things like we were just talking about. I know it sounds a little loosey-goosey, but we go through a very methodical approach to that in the method. Okay, Donato7 asks, how do you play when someone is singing? I got a good easy one for this one. So let me go back to the keyboard. I kind of separate it into, we call it solo style and accompaniment style, and it's actually not quite as hard one side or the other as I make it, but this is the easiest way to describe it, I think. If you're playing solo style, you tend to play chords in your left hand, melody line in the right? So, correct? So, for example, if I'm playing Silent Night, so chord down here, melody up here. And the reason is because no one is singing the melody, so you need to hear it. Something like that. Well, if you're singing, you don't need to play the melody line. That's a huge breakthrough for a lot of people, right? There's no need to sing the melody line when a singer is singing it because you don't want to step all over them. But the great news is that almost makes your life easier. So how you translate that to a piano is you can pretty much just play chords with both hands. But that will get kind of messy if you just play the exact same thing. Like, someone's singing this tune right now. Silent Night. You could do that. That's kind of messy. So typically what you do is you play some notes of the chord in your left hand and some notes of a chord in your right hand. That's called a voicing. It's a whole other chapter of crazy information you can get into and spend a long time. We get into that in the method as well in some of the later courses. But all it is splitting up the notes of a chord into two hands and leaving some notes out sometimes. Something like that. So you say, Silent Night, Holy Night, right? And the final step then, once you get past that, is to start playing chords in your right hand and to give yourself more bass note. If you're not playing with a bass player, play by bass notes, I mean the roots of the chord down low. So you start playing like this. Silent Night, ba-da-da-da, right? Ba-da-da, ba-da-da. Whatever. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Whatever you're doing that way. So the idea is, in short, solo style is usually all chords with your left hand and melody with your right in some way. Accompaniment style is don't worry about playing the melody, so just play chords in both hands. Or play your chord in a right hand and then try to play something down lower on your piano just to kind of fill things up. All right, quick answer. Moving right on. Nomad Wanderer. Good name, Nomad Wanderer. Hope you have a lot of walking this weekend. What is the minimum number of keys I would need on a keyboard to learn piano? You know, there's a great question too. I think, what do we officially? I've got some official answer. Actually, I know where that official answer is. I wish I had somebody else here. We'd put it up on the screen. Go to my blog. It's at pianoinaflash.com/blog, B-L-O-G. pianoinaflash.com/blog. If you go there, one of these blog posts that's usually toward the top, probably the top 4 or 5, actually is an entire blog about ideas about your first piano or keyboard. But my answer to that is a couple things. You want at least, 4 or 5 octaves. So what is this? I guess that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I wouldn't go any less than 4 octaves. You could get away with that. Anything a little bit bigger is better. And I don't know how many notes that is. What is that? There's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 12, 24, 36, 48. So maybe 48 or 49 keys, however I don't know exactly how they count those up. That's probably the smallest I would go. The bigger deal, make sure, this is really the bigger deal for me, make darn sure that if you're going to get some teeny tiny keyboard, which I really don't recommend, a little tiny thing from Walmart. Not that Walmart doesn't have nice things, I didn't mean it that way, but sometimes the really small keyboards don't have full width keys. They're not exactly the same size as a piano key, right? That's a disaster, because then you're going to get used to playing something like, you're just getting the target practice down on yours, and then you move to a regular piano and the keys are wider and you're like, and everything you learned is kind of goes for naught. So yeah, so make sure you've got full size keys. The other thing to look for is what's called weighted action. That's weighted as in some weight. That means it feels more like a piano and less like an organ. And maybe 4 or 5 octaves, something like that. There's just so many crazy good pianos out there for such little money now. That used to be a bigger issue than it is now. You can get a fantastic digital piano. I mean, if you're just starting, what used to be $1,500, $2,000, you can get for $400 or $500 now. So check out that blog post. There'll be a lot of information on there. Sharad says, is there a proper way or a right time to play chord inversions? No, there is not a proper way or a right time, because it's all okay all the time. Now, how's that for a lack of help, huh? Sorry about that. There's not much I can say. What he means by that is, really, I think the answer was probably going to be, if there's a right time, it would be whenever it makes your life easier. So, for example, if I'm playing from an F to a F, excuse me, from a C chord to an F chord to a G chord, say I've got to get between those 3 chords, or I'm going for a while where a tune just goes back and forth between a C and an F chord, right? So instead of doing this jump, and you're going to miss some notes, and right, you're going to get all that wrong. Instead of that, you can say, well, look, instead of jumping up, I'm going to play these same 3 notes, but I'm going to keep the C on the bottom, right? So here's the first one. And then instead of jumping up to this, I'm just going to do this. So that's what an inversion is for anyone that's never seen that before. So what inversions do is really make your life simpler, because you can move less fingers or less distance. So I think a broad answer would be, the proper way to play an inversion is some way that it makes your life simpler. So, whatever you're doing, just who knows what that would be, but doing that's a lot simpler than doing. So use inversions when you can to make your life simpler. That's probably my answer there. The one thing you do need to worry about with an inversion is the issue of sometimes you really want to hear a particular bass note, right? Like if you da-da, like I have a piano man, like Billy Joel's Piano Man. I didn't do it. That's what it is, sorry. So, you really need to hear that bass line. Right. That bass line was such an important part of the tune that if I would have picked some other way and inverted things around, and you wouldn't have heard this particular line, right, then it would have made the tune sound kind of dumb. So that's, every now and then I've had some students that get into trouble where they're using a bunch of inversions, and they've really kind of made the tune not sound like a tune, because some tunes it's really critical. The bass line is such an integral part of a tune that it happens just the way you're expecting it to happen. So that doesn't happen a lot, but maybe that's a far out oblique answer to that question there. So moving on. In the past, plain text. In the past, I've had traditional lessons. Do you think it'll be difficult to unlearn the techniques? No, and that's a great, great question. I'm glad you asked that. That sounds like a plant. I don't think it is, unless one of my guys out there just did it. That's a great question. The question is, look, I've studied some traditional piano. Is this such a departure that it's going to screw things up in some way? And I say, no, I really don't think so. And I'm not just saying that because, for obvious reasons. Any time you spend behind a piano, any seat time you've had, doing all this, it's better than not having done that. And so your fingers are like, hey, I can understand where everything is and I get this. Now, having said that, so you'll be way ahead in some ways. But having said that, what's going to be just a bruiser for you is this concept that what you see notated in black and white dots on a sheet of paper, it's not the law. Nor is it even music, right? There's a good point. Cut it back to my original conversation, right? Black dots on a white paper are not music. They are not. They're music notation. Aha! Right? They're a recording of music. It's just a way to record music. Because back then when we developed music notation, no one had tape recorders, right? There's no way to record anything. So when Beethoven and Bach wanted to say, hey, I've got this great new piece of music, they couldn't just play it for the orchestra. They couldn't hit the CD player and play it, right? They had to write it down and hand it to them. So keep that in mind. There's no magic about black dots on white paper. So the key is to always have this understanding that our goal when you're playing in a style is not necessarily to be a great reader, although it's a cool thing to read, but the goal is to play, right? This is music, right? That's music. No matter what it looked like notated, whether it was black dots on white paper or whether it was in a lead sheet or whatever, the music is what we're going for. And usually the thing that I have students that have been pretty good classical piano players really struggle with, and it's purely a noggin thing, it's not a technique thing, they just can't get themselves to look away, right? And say, it's the people that go into a party, then someone knows they played for 10 years, and somebody says, oh, come on, Helen, sit down and play something. And Helen says, oh, I didn't bring my music, right? Oh, that just pains me when I hear people say that. So that's the hard part. So there you have it. Okay. Brent Dirks. Scott, can you comment on an appropriate weekly time commitment for your courses? A vague idea how long it might take to get through one. Ooh, boy, I wish I had all. This is somewhere on a blog post too, I think. If you guys that are out there helping me moderate this can find whatever that time distance, I've got a decent handle on it. But the question is about in my online course. First of all, a weekly time commitment. I'm hesitating to just say what I'm thinking everybody's wanting me to say, which is, oh, whatever you want to do is fine. And it kind of is. Here's the deal. We kind of decoupled, and I'll try to say this. I've only got 4 or 5 minutes left. When I wrote, not when I wrote the method, but when we developed this whole online method, the whole concept of how we did this, which was a big departure from going to see somebody once a week for a half an hour or an hour, right? It allowed me to completely decouple the concept of how much time it was going to take you to get through something from what the logical thing is I wanted to teach you. Now, where I'm coming with this is when you teach privately and you see somebody once a week, you're under this kind of pressure to always say, well, you're kind of dosing things out for 7 days down the road. And I don't know where 7 days ever became this magic number for, hey, there's the perfect amount of time someone should stew on something before we give them something new, right? So, and I always had kind of a beef with that. And that's what's beautiful about the online thing, because it's available 24/7. So as a student, you really are the one that's controlling the accelerator, right? And so I know your original question is how much time should you spend? I don't know. If you 15 minutes, 20 minutes most days would probably be fine. But I also know no matter what I say, that is not close to what's going to happen to an adult's typical lifestyle, right? You're gonna get sick. You're gonna go on vacation. Some weeks you'll just be cranking, which is great because if you're really cranking, and that's kind of how we see it, we can track how people work through the courses. It's beautiful because, you'll see people not do anything for 2 or 3 weeks, and then in a 7 or 8 day period, clearly they were either on vacation and they were home, or they got sick and they were home, or they're just really for some reason cranking. They'll go through probably a month and a half, 2 months worth of material in 7 or 8 days. And that to me is beautiful because it's completely up to you. So maybe the best analogy I could use, and I've used this a few times before again, in my method, I'll drive the bus because I'll steer the way I want you to. I'm going to give you stuff the way I want to give it to you, but it's completely up to you as a student as to how fast you get through it. If I give you a little dose of something and it's hard, it may take you a week to get through it. And what's hard for you, the next student may say, ah, that one didn't bother me at all. For whatever reason, I got it underhand in 10 minutes. Great, move on. It's completely up to you. Now, finally, having said that, what are we about? Yeah, 4 or 5 minutes. As far as a vague idea is the key word of this question. It is going to be vague, but to get through one course level, I would say course one. I can't tell you how long it's going to take you to get through it, but I can tell you how long the amount of material in there typically takes people that are taking traditional lessons. Course one usually is, 4 to 6 months of traditional lessons. Frankly, most of my students get through it a lot quicker. Two is a little bit more than that, probably 6, 7 months worth of lessons. I would say most of ours get in there. Sorry, I'm getting typed at right there. Um, they're saying, "Quick, get off! We got to go to another one." Right? The whole course is probably 4 or 5 years worth of lessons. So if you do the math on that, that's why we're so comfortable with the tuition cost and the enrollment charge and everything. The note says, oh, there's links to the homepage and info on course one in the description. Okay. Oh, in the description. Okay. You read the description of this video down below me, I guess, and there's some links to the homepage. All that information about timing and stuff you can find in there. And do it that way. So anyway, I got to cut this short. If anyone wants to follow me, we're going to jump over and do this on Facebook on our do the same thing and just kind of continue on our Piano Guy Facebook page. So if that's the case, follow me over. We're going to get started in about 3 or 4 minutes over there. Thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a fun day Friday, and I hope you're having fun. All you on the West Coast are got a few more hours, so sorry. See you next time. Have fun playing piano, everybody.